The most dangerous lie is the one written before anyone asks what really happened. The afternoon sun settled over downtown Birmingham with the kind of quiet confidence that made every storefront shimmer beneath the summer heat. Office workers hurried toward cafes, delivery trucks crawled through narrow streets, and pedestrians crossed intersections without giving much thought to the patrol cars that rolled past them. For most people, the flashing lights of a police cruiser were simply part of the city. They represented order, routine, and reassurance. Few stopped to wonder what happened when those lights were aimed at the wrong person. Marcus Carter certainly didn't. His dark blue pickup eased into the curb outside a small accounting office where he had spent the morning delivering custom furniture for a longtime client. Sweat clung to the back of his shirt after hours of unloading handcrafted cabinets, but the satisfaction of another completed job outweighed the exhaustion. He checked the invoice on his phone, exchanged a friendly wave with the receptionist standing near the entrance, and climbed back into his truck. His phone buzzed. A message from his younger sister appeared across the screen. "Mom's birthday dinner is still at 6. Don't be late." Marcus smiled to himself before placing the phone face down on the passenger seat. Family dinners were sacred in the Carter household. No matter how busy life became, birthdays always brought everyone back together around the same table. He shifted the truck into drive. Less than 30 seconds later, red and blue lights exploded across his rearview mirror. Marcus frowned. He had barely traveled half a block. He glanced at his speed. Well below the limit. His headlights were on. His registration had been renewed only weeks earlier. Nothing made sense. He calmly activated his turn signal and pulled against the curb. The patrol SUV stopped sharply behind him. Two officers stepped out almost immediately. Officer Ryan Mitchell adjusted his sunglasses as he approached the driver's side with deliberate confidence. Beside him, Officer Brandon Hayes moved toward the passenger side, resting one hand casually near his duty belt while scanning the truck's interior. Marcus lowered his window before either officer reached the door. "Good afternoon, officers." Ryan ignored the greeting. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus blinked once. "I'm sorry. You heard me." Marcus kept both hands resting visibly on the steering wheel. "May I ask why?" Ryan's expression remained unchanged. "We're conducting an investigation." "Into what?" "You'll find out after you step out." The answer settled uneasily in the warm afternoon air. Marcus looked from one officer to the other. "I'd be happy to cooperate. I'd just like to know why I've been stopped." Brandon leaned slightly toward the passenger window. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Pedestrians walking nearby slowed almost instinctively. A woman carrying grocery bags glanced toward the truck before continuing down the sidewalk. Across the street, two construction workers paused their conversation long enough to watch. Marcus noticed them. He also noticed Ryan's body camera blinking steadily against his uniform. He took a slow breath. "I haven't refused anything," Marcus said evenly. "I'm simply asking what law I violated." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Step out now." Marcus maintained eye contact without raising his voice. "Officer, if there's a reason, I'll gladly listen." For several seconds, no one moved. The silence felt heavier than the traffic drifting through the intersection. Ryan suddenly reached for the driver's door. Marcus instinctively placed one hand against it. "I'm not resisting," he said quickly. "I'm asking you not to pull me out without explaining why." The movement lasted barely a second, but it was enough. Ryan stepped backward and looked directly at Brandon. "You saw that?" Brandon gave a short nod. "I did." Marcus stared between them, confusion replacing caution. "Saw what?" Ryan's voice became louder. "You interfered with a lawful detention. I touched my own door. You refused lawful commands. I asked a question." Ryan unclipped a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Marcus Carter, you're under arrest for obstructing an investigation and resisting an officer." Marcus's eyes widened. "What investigation?" "Neither." Officer answered. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed across the sidewalk as nearby conversations fell silent. Across the street, several people lifted their phones. No one watching knew how the encounter had begun. Most would only remember how it appeared to end. Marcus never struggled as Officer Ryan Mitchell tightened the handcuffs around his wrists. He simply stood there, looking from one officer to the other, as though he were still waiting for someone to explain what had just happened. The answer never came. Ryan guided him toward the patrol SUV while Brandon Hayes opened the rear door. "You have the right to remain silent," Ryan began in a practiced voice. Marcus listened carefully. When the warning ended, he asked only one question. What exactly am I being arrested for? Ryan closed the door without replying. The cruiser pulled away from the curb, leaving behind a sidewalk full of strangers who believed they had just witnessed another routine arrest. None of them had heard the questions Marcus kept asking. Most had only seen the handcuffs. Inside the vehicle, silence settled between the front and back seats. Marcus leaned back and stared through the protective partition. I never refused to cooperate. Neither officer responded. Several minutes later, they arrived at the precinct. The booking area operated with familiar efficiency. Phones rang. Officers exchanged paperwork. Someone wheeled a cart stacked with evidence boxes across the polished floor. For everyone else inside the building, it looked like another ordinary afternoon. Ryan removed the handcuffs only long enough for standard processing before replacing them with another set attached to a holding bench. A booking officer glanced at the arrest sheet. What are the charges? Ryan answered without hesitation. Obstruction of an investigation. Resisting a lawful arrest. The booking officer nodded and continued typing. Marcus looked directly at him. I never resisted. The officer paused for only a fraction of a second before returning his attention to the computer screen. I don't decide the charges, sir. Marcus lowered his eyes. I understand. Across the room, Ryan and Brandon stepped into a small report-writing office. The door remained slightly open. Brandon leaned against a filing cabinet. You going with failure to comply? Ryan shook his head. No. Obstruction gives us more room. What about the door? Ryan opened the incident report on his computer. He blocked me from performing a lawful detention. Brandon folded his arms. He touched his own door. Ryan continued typing without looking up. He prevented me from opening it. Brandon remained quiet. Ryan finally stopped typing and looked across the desk. You saw him interfere. Brandon held his gaze for a long moment. Yeah. Ryan resumed writing. Within minutes, the report began taking shape. The language sounded precise. Objective. Professional. It described Marcus refusing repeated lawful commands. It described aggressive movements. It described officer safety concerns. It described resistance. It did not describe Marcus asking why he had been stopped. It did not mention that no investigation had ever been explained. Outside the office, Marcus sat alone beneath fluorescent lights. He replayed every second of the traffic stop in his mind, searching for the moment everything had changed. Nothing made sense. Late that afternoon, his fingerprints were completed. His personal belongings were sealed inside a plastic property bag. His wallet, his keys, his phone, everything except the truth. As the booking officer prepared the final paperwork, Marcus quietly requested a phone call. The officer nodded. You'll get one. At nearly the same moment, Ryan clicked the final line of his report. He leaned back, read it once more, and pressed submit. Neither officer noticed the notification that appeared almost instantly on the record system. External surveillance footage requested by Defense Preservation Protocol. The alert disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. No one in the room seemed to realize that somewhere beyond the walls of the precinct, a camera had been recording the entire encounter from a very different angle. By sunrise the next morning, the arrest report looked complete. Every sentence flowed smoothly. Every conclusion appeared supported. To anyone reading it for the first time, the case seemed simple. Two experienced officers had encountered an uncooperative suspect, issued repeated lawful commands, and made an arrest after he resisted. On paper, there was almost nothing to question. Marcus Carter sat alone in a holding cell, unaware that his future was already being summarized by people who had never met him. The metal bench beneath him was cold despite the summer heat outside. Hours passed slowly, interrupted only by the distant buzz of intercoms and the echo of heavy doors opening and closing. He replayed the traffic stop over and over, searching for something he had missed. There was nothing. He had asked questions. He had stayed calm. He had never threatened anyone. When a detention officer finally escorted him to a consultation room, a woman carrying a leather briefcase was already waiting. She stood as Marcus entered. My name is Olivia Brooks. Marcus nodded cautiously. You were appointed? I was contacted this morning. She waited until the officer closed the door before sitting down. I've read the arrest report. Marcus watched her expression. It doesn't sound like what happened. It isn't. Olivia opened the file. They claim you ignored multiple commands. I asked why I was being stopped. They claim you physically prevented Officer Mitchell from opening your door. I placed my hand on my own door after he grabbed it. They also say you became increasingly aggressive. Marcus almost smiled at the absurdity. I never even raised my voice. Olivia closed the folder without another word. She had practiced criminal defense long enough to recognize when reports sounded almost too polished. Real encounters were messy. Real memories contained uncertainty. This report contained none. Everything fit together perfectly. Sometimes that was the first warning sign. What evidence do they have? Marcus asked. So far, she glanced at her notes. The officer's statements. Body camera? They say it malfunctioned. Dash camera? Unavailable. Marcus frowned. Both. Olivia gave a slow nod. It happens. But not often. Silence settled between them. Finally, Olivia leaned forward. Tell me exactly where the stop happened. Marcus described the intersection, the accounting office, the surrounding businesses, and the construction site across the street. Olivia listened without interrupting, occasionally making a brief note. When he mentioned the office building behind him, she stopped writing. Glass entrance. Yes. Facing the street? Marcus nodded. I believe so. Olivia looked toward the window, her thoughts moving faster than her pen. Modern office buildings rarely relied on a single security camera. There were entrances, parking lots, loading docks. Sometimes neighboring businesses covered the same sidewalk from entirely different angles. She closed the notebook. I'm not interested in proving you're innocent by arguing with two officers. Marcus looked at her. I'm interested in finding something that doesn't have a memory. Less than an hour later, Olivia walked into the building's management office across from the arrest location. She introduced herself and requested preservation of every surveillance recording covering the previous afternoon. The property manager hesitated. I'm afraid someone from the police department was already here this morning. Olivia stopped writing. They asked about the cameras? The manager nodded slowly. And they specifically wanted to know how long we keep our backup recordings before they're automatically overwritten. 3 weeks later, courtroom 4B was nearly full before the morning docket officially began. Wooden benches creaked as spectators settled into their seats. Attorneys quietly reviewed legal pads. Bailiffs moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency. At the front of the room, the seal of the state hung above the empty bench where Judge Eleanor Whitmore would soon preside. Marcus Carter sat beside Olivia Brooks at the defense table. He wore a navy suit borrowed from his older brother. The handcuffs were gone. The weight of the accusation was not. Across the aisle, Officer Ryan Mitchell adjusted the knot of his tie, while Officer Brandon Hayes spoke quietly with Assistant District Attorney David Lawson. They looked calm. Their confidence reflected the strength of a case built almost entirely on sworn police testimony. Lawson glanced toward the defense. You've had full discovery, he said politely to Olivia. The evidence speaks for itself. Olivia offered a courteous smile. We'll let the evidence do exactly that. Before Lawson could respond, the courtroom deputy announced, All rise. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered with measured steps. The room stood in complete silence until she took her seat. Please be seated. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but every person in the courtroom immediately focused on her. The prosecution called Officer Ryan Mitchell as its first witness. After taking the oath, Ryan settled into the witness chair with the confidence of someone who had testified many times before. Lawson began with simple questions. State your name and occupation. Officer Ryan Mitchell, Birmingham Police Department. Were you on duty on the afternoon of June 14th? Yes. Ryan described the traffic stop almost exactly as he had written it in his report. His answers came without hesitation. He testified that Marcus ignored repeated lawful commands. He claimed Marcus physically prevented officers from safely conducting the detention. He stated that Marcus's behavior created legitimate officer safety concerns. Every sentence matched the written report. Every detail reinforced the last. Lawson finished his direct examination with one final question. Did you have any reason to fabricate this arrest? No, sir. No further questions. Ryan stepped down looking satisfied. Next came Officer Brandon Hayes. His testimony echoed Ryan's almost word for word. He confirmed the same sequence of events. The same movements, the same alleged resistance. To anyone hearing both officers for the first time, the consistency appeared convincing. Marcus lowered his eyes. Two officers, two identical stories, one defendant. Olivia quietly closed her notebook. She had barely written a single line during either testimony. Marcus leaned toward her. They're saying exactly the same thing. Without taking her eyes off the witness stand, Olivia answered softly. I know. Aren't you going to challenge them? She finally looked at him. Not yet. Judge Whitmore glanced toward the defense table. Ms. Brooks, are you prepared for cross-examination? Olivia rose slowly, buttoned her jacket, and carried only one thin legal pad to the podium. No stack of exhibits. No dramatic gestures. Just a single folder. She stopped a few feet from Officer Hayes and smiled politely. Officer Hayes. She paused just long enough for the silence to become noticeable. I only have a few questions. Neither officer realized that Olivia had no intention of attacking their story. She intended to let them strengthen it first. The strongest testimony is not always the most truthful. Sometimes, it is simply the most rehearsed. Officer Brandon Hayes remained in the witness chair, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He appeared relaxed, almost relieved that direct examination was over. Beside the prosecution table, Officer Ryan Mitchell watched quietly, confident that the difficult part of the trial had already passed. Olivia Brooks approached without a single exhibit in her hands. She stopped just a few feet from the witness stand. Good morning, Officer Hayes. Good morning. You've been with the Birmingham Police Department for how many years? 14. And during those 14 years, you've conducted hundreds of traffic stops? Yes. So giving commands during a stop is second nature to you? It is. Olivia nodded. No dispute there. She glanced briefly at her notes before looking back up. Officer Hayes, approximately how many commands did Officer Mitchell give Mr. Carter? Hayes answered immediately. Several. Could you be more specific? I'd say 4 or 5. Olivia smiled politely. You'd say? Approximately. So you're not certain. Hayes shifted slightly. No one counts commands during an arrest. Fair enough. Olivia's tone remained calm. Can you recall the very first command? Step out of the vehicle. And Mr. Carter's exact response? He refused. Olivia waited. Those were his exact words. Hayes hesitated. I don't remember the exact wording. So you remember a refusal, but not the words. Correct. Olivia nodded once. She wrote nothing. Judge Whitmore watched silently from the bench. The courtroom had grown noticeably quieter. Olivia continued. You testified that Mr. Carter became aggressive. Yes. What specifically did he do? He blocked Officer Mitchell from opening the driver's door. With what? His hand. One hand. Yes. The left or the right? Hayes blinked. I don't remember. You don't remember which hand? No. But you clearly remember it happened. Yes. Olivia slowly walked a few steps toward the jury box before turning back. Officer, did Mr. Carter ever threaten either officer verbally? No. Did he strike anyone? No. Did he attempt to flee? No. Did he push either officer? No. The courtroom remained silent. Olivia let the answers settle. So the aggressive behavior you're describing is placing one hand on his own vehicle door. Lawson immediately stood. Objection. Argumentative. Judge Whitmore looked toward Olivia. Sustained. Rephrase. Olivia nodded respectfully. Officer Hayes, other than touching the driver's door, can you identify any physical act you considered aggressive? Hayes searched for an answer. Several long seconds passed. Finally, he shook his head. No. Olivia thanked him and returned to the podium. Then she asked what sounded like the simplest question of the morning. You reviewed Officer Mitchell's written report before testifying today, correct? Hayes answered without hesitation. Yes. And you discussed the incident together before today's hearing? Yes. The word echoed through the courtroom. For the first time, Judge Whitmore lowered her glasses and made a handwritten note in the margin of her legal pad. Olivia noticed it. So did Ryan Mitchell. A nearly invisible crease appeared across his forehead. The officer's story had not changed. But something else had. For the first time since the trial began, the court was no longer hearing two independent memories. It was beginning to hear one carefully shared version of the same event. Every person in the courtroom turned toward Olivia Brooks. For the first time since the trial had begun, the prosecution looked uncertain. Judge Eleanor Whitmore repeated her question. Ms. Brooks, does the defense intend to present the surveillance recordings? Olivia answered without hesitation. Yes, Your Honor. She reached down beside the defense table and lifted a thin evidence binder along with a sealed digital storage case. The defense moves to admit Defense Exhibit 12. The courtroom clerk accepted the evidence and handed it to the bailiff before it reached the judge. David Lawson rose immediately. Objection. Judge Whitmore looked toward him. On what grounds? We've not yet established that this recording accurately depicts the incident. Olivia remained perfectly calm. We intend to do exactly that. Judge Whitmore considered the objection for only a moment. Proceed with foundation. Olivia called Samuel Ortiz back to the witness stand. He identified the storage device. He confirmed the chain of custody. He explained that the original recording had been copied using forensic imaging software without altering a single frame. He verified the date, the timestamp, the camera location, the digital authentication record. Each answer was short, precise, professional. When Olivia finished, Judge Whitmore turned toward the prosecution. Any further objection? Lawson hesitated. No, Your Honor. The exhibit is admitted. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery before disappearing beneath a sharp glance from the bailiff. Olivia walked to the courtroom display monitor. This recording comes from camera 2, positioned above the main entrance of the accounting building across the street. She looked briefly toward Judge Whitmore. It contains no audio. Understood. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. The screen remained black for several long seconds. Ryan Mitchell fixed his eyes on the monitor. Brandon Hayes swallowed hard. Marcus Carter never looked away. The video began. A wide-angle image showed the entire sidewalk, the parked vehicles, and nearly half the intersection. The patrol SUV entered the frame. It stopped behind Marcus's sedan. Everything unfolded exactly where Samuel Ortiz had described. No one spoke. The courtroom watched in complete silence. Ryan approached the driver's side. Brandon remained several feet behind him. Marcus lowered his window almost immediately. Even without sound, his posture appeared calm. His hands stayed visible. His movements were slow. Olivia allowed the recording to continue. The camera captured Ryan speaking. Marcus answered. Again. Ryan spoke. Marcus answered. Neither man appeared hurried. Neither appeared aggressive. Then Ryan suddenly reached for the driver's door. The image froze. Olivia faced the witness stand. Officer Mitchell testified that Mr. Carter physically prevented him from opening the door. She looked back toward the screen. Let's continue. The video resumed. Marcus instinctively placed one hand against the inside edge of his own door. He did not lunge. He did not shove. He did not strike anyone. Within less than 2 seconds, Ryan grabbed Marcus's arm. Brandon immediately moved in. The handcuffs appeared moments later. The entire courtroom remained motionless. No one shifted in their seat. No one whispered. Even without sound, one fact had become impossible to ignore. The first physical contact had not come from Marcus Carter. It had come from Officer Ryan Mitchell. Olivia quietly paused the recording once more. The frozen image remained on the courtroom screen. Marcus's open hand rested on his own car door. Ryan's hand gripped Marcus's wrist. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. She studied the image for several long seconds before slowly removing her glasses. Then she spoke with unusual deliberation. Counsel. Her eyes never left the screen. I believe this court has just seen something neither arrest report described. There is a moment in every courtroom when evidence stops being information and becomes truth. Judge Eleanor Whitmore continued studying the frozen image on the courtroom monitor. Officer Ryan Mitchell's hand was wrapped firmly around Marcus Carter's wrist. Marcus's hand remained resting against his own vehicle door. Nothing about the image resembled the struggle described in the arrest report. Judge Whitmore slowly turned toward the prosecution. Mr. Lawson. The prosecutor stood. Yes, Your Honor. Would you agree this exhibit has been properly admitted into evidence? Yes. And the prosecution has no challenge to its authenticity? Lawson hesitated. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded once. Very well. She looked toward Officer Ryan Mitchell. Officer Mitchell, please return to the witness stand. A quiet ripple moved through the gallery. Ryan rose more slowly than before. The confidence that had carried him through direct examination had disappeared. After taking his seat, he avoided looking at the monitor. Olivia Brooks approached. Officer Mitchell, you testified under oath that Mr. Carter physically resisted your attempt to perform a lawful detention. Yes. She pointed toward the frozen frame. Can you identify any strike? No. Any shove? No. Any attempt to flee? No. She nodded. You also testified that Mr. Carter became aggressive before physical contact occurred. Yes. Olivia pressed a button on the courtroom console. The video resumed. Frame by frame. Ryan stepped forward. Marcus remained still. Ryan reached first. The recording stopped again. Olivia faced the witness. Officer Mitchell. She spoke softly enough that everyone leaned forward to hear. Who initiated physical contact? Ryan remained silent. Judge Whitmore looked over her glasses. You may answer. Ryan swallowed. I reached for him. Olivia continued. Before Mr. Carter touched you? Yes. Before he struck anyone? Yes. Before he attempted to leave? Yes. Every answer seemed smaller than the one before it. Olivia walked back toward the defense table. Then she opened the arrest report. Officer Mitchell, would you please read the highlighted sentence beginning with the words, "The suspect became physically aggressive." Ryan stared at the page. His voice lacked the certainty it once carried. The suspect initiated physical resistance, requiring officers to gain immediate control for safety reasons. Olivia gently closed the report. The video shows the opposite, doesn't it? Lawson stood abruptly. Objection. Judge Whitmore did not take her eyes off Ryan. Overruled. The silence that followed felt heavier than the objection itself. Ryan looked toward the prosecutor, then toward Brandon Hayes, finally toward the judge. His shoulders dropped. It doesn't match exactly. Judge Whitmore's expression never changed. It doesn't match at all, officer. No one in the courtroom moved. The judge leaned slightly forward. This court relies upon sworn testimony because the integrity of the justice system depends upon it. She paused. When testimony conflicts with objective evidence, the evidence controls. She turned toward Brandon Hayes. Officer Hayes. He slowly lifted his head. You testified that your recollection was independent. Yes. The judge picked up her legal pad. Yet you admitted reviewing Officer Mitchell's report and discussing your testimony before appearing in this courtroom. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Whitmore placed the pad back onto the bench. The court now has objective evidence, inconsistent reports, and sworn testimony that has materially changed under examination. She looked directly at both officers. For the first time that day, the authority in her voice carried unmistakable disappointment. I am no longer evaluating whether Mr. Carter resisted arrest. She allowed the words to settle across the silent courtroom. I am now evaluating whether this court has been asked to believe testimony that the evidence itself refuses to support. Justice does not erase what happened. It simply refuses to let a lie become history. The courtroom remained silent. Judge Eleanor Whitmore looked once more at the frozen image on the monitor before signaling for the screen to go dark. The room slowly returned to full light. No one seemed eager to speak first. Finally, the judge folded her hands. The record is clear. Her voice was steady. The prosecution's case relied almost entirely upon the credibility of the arresting officers. She paused. Objective evidence has now demonstrated material inconsistencies between sworn testimony, the written arrest report, and the events captured by independent surveillance. She turned toward David Lawson. Mr. Lawson. The prosecutor stood. Does the state wish to proceed? Lawson looked toward Ryan Mitchell. Then Brandon Hayes. Neither officer met his eyes. After several long seconds, Lawson answered quietly. No, Your Honor. The state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Marcus Carter. No applause followed. No celebration. Only silence. Judge Whitmore nodded once. The motion is granted. She picked up her pen. All charges against Marcus Carter are dismissed with prejudice. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. One strike. Clear. Final. Marcus closed his eyes for only a moment. Not because he had won. Because the weight he had carried since the day of the arrest had finally been lifted. Olivia Brooks placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Neither of them smiled. Some victories were too important for celebration. Across the courtroom, Ryan Mitchell remained seated. The confidence that had defined him at the beginning of the trial was gone. Brandon Hayes stared silently at the defense table. Neither officer spoke. Judge Whitmore looked directly at both men. This court makes no finding today beyond the evidence before it. She paused. But let me be absolutely clear. When those entrusted with enforcing the law submit reports that cannot withstand objective scrutiny, they do more than endanger a single defendant. They weaken public confidence in every honest officer who wears the same badge. No one moved. The words settled across the courtroom with more weight than the gavel itself. The judge continued. The clerk will forward today's transcript and admitted exhibits to the appropriate oversight authorities for whatever review they deem necessary. Ryan slowly lowered his head. For the first time since the traffic stop, there was nothing left to explain. Nothing left to defend. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited behind metal barricades. Camera shutters clicked as Marcus and Olivia emerged through the front doors. Microphones were raised. Mr. Carter, do you have a statement? Marcus stopped. He looked back at the courthouse before answering. I don't want anyone to hate the police. His voice remained calm. I want people to trust that the truth still matters. He thanked Olivia quietly before walking toward his family. No speeches. No anger. Only dignity. As the afternoon sun settled across the courthouse steps, the building looked exactly as it had that morning. The stone had not changed. The courtroom had not changed. The law itself had not changed. Only one thing had. A lie that had once carried the authority of a badge now carried the weight of exposure. Because the strongest evidence was never the loudest voice. It was the truth that never needed to rehearse. He entered the courthouse as a defendant. He walked out as a man whose name had been returned to him. And on that day, justice did not speak the loudest. It simply refused to look away.